Hey guys, how's it going? Jovan Hutton Pulitzer as I was changing up my screen here. Sorry for the delay. It was signal came back. I got to thinking about in questions that were popping up on my page about people and what's going on with the United States election. Now, it's really interesting to look at everything coming in from our election, right? Hey, Tim, how you doing? Folks, let me know where you're joining me from around the country. And I'm going to share with you some interesting insights because I'm watching the comments and people are exceptionally concerned with like the election and what's going on with the vote. And there's some people that says, hey, it's not done yet. And there's other people saying, well, Trump needs to leave and all this other stuff. So what I decided to do is, instead of understanding and working from the premise, right? And this is good for internationally, so you can hear some from the premise that, you know, America kind of leads the world. I'm working from the premise that, okay, let's set the United States aside. How do other countries in the world, how do they handle this, right? How does it really get handled? And what do they do in their elections? Hey, Fiona. Hey, Tim. Hey, Mike. Dennis, how you doing? Bruce. The question is something wrong in what's going on right now, or is something wrong in what we're doing? So I'm going to pull up a map here. I want to show you, I guess, a few things that it's interesting. I guess people just don't understand it. Let me share my screen properly with you here. Let's see. Go to share my screen. Stand by for me just 1 second. Okay, I think I've got this right. Let me share that with you. Take a look at that. Do you see that screen? Now look at this screen, okay? It's my background and it's the screen. I'll go back up to full size so you can look at it. This is, quote unquote, the state of the world as it is today. And this is from the Global Freedom Project, okay? And this is the organizations. Hey, Gilgore, how you doing? I'm going to say it right. Giligor, Adrian Borza. Hey, from Romania, how's it going? Okay, and you know, people are totally fed up with the recounts and everything else. But let me go back to this chart. What you're looking at on this chart is everywhere in green are all the countries in the world that are basically considered free. The ones with the kind of tannish yellow, okay, are the places in the world that are only considered partially free, okay? So green is free countries. The yellowish is only partially free, and the purple, which is almost half of the land mass of the world, but the purple is where people are not considered free. Now, what's very interesting here, hey guys, what's very, very interesting here, nice to see you, Jamie, is we must put what's going on here in the United States into a framework. Okay, if you think something's going on in the United States here and it's not quite right, it does not matter what side you fall on, right? Does not matter if you fall to the left, does not matter if you fall to the right. That's not what we're discussing at the moment. What we're discussing is election integrity. Voter fraud is when an individual voter commits fraud on their vote or doing their vote. Then there's election fraud. Election fraud, something completely different. Election fraud is when election officials, states, etc., right? States, oh, moving to New Orleans. Hey, states engage in fraud, which defrauds the people who voted. Now, let's don't get the things confused. And so this popped up on my wall today. I was just sharing something about freedom and appeasement. Of course, I am for freedom. I am not for appeasement. I am 100% for free speech. Rob, I'm glad you caught me. Thank you. And so I wanted to take a look at freedom and how do all these countries around the world, how do they deal with issues we deal with? And sometimes when you live in America, you get all this distorted media frenzy over certain things. When if you just kind of went across the border, let's say, you have different perspectives. I'll give you a quick one to compare to before I start showing you some data. Number one, of course, our border with Mexico is and has been wildly porous, right? And America has embraced it in the past as if you get here, you get to stay here, right? You get all these benefits. You don't have to pay for anything. You get a place to live, get health insurance, all this other stuff that goes on if you can just get across. However, if we just went to Mexico's border south, and you go to the very end, on the other end of their border, by Mexican law, you get caught crossing, they will shoot you. Think about that. So where does America rank in this process of freedom? Where on this map, if you look at 227 reporting countries or territories, 227 reporting countries or territories that actually have election rules, all this green, and even all the tan, none of the purple, of course, because you have, and the purple, you have no rules, okay? But in the green, what are their rules? What do they require? So I'm going to take you on a little journey, and I'm going to share you some screenshots so you understand some important things about how elections work around the globe. I may not get all my slides in order here, just bear with me. But let's take a look at this, shall we? Let's go to right here, okay? And this is the Pew Research Center. From voter registration to mail-in ballots, how do countries around the world handle their elections? Well, first, most all the countries, okay, far more than half, require that their people voting actually be registered. You have to be registered to vote. Now, that's a little bit of smoke and mirrors because those over half of those countries that require voter registration, that's an act that the citizen must take on themselves. Now, other countries that don't fall in that category almost have the same thing as when they do their census, like India, you are automatically registered and considered a voter because you're verified to be a citizen and you are part of the census. Okay, so don't let it seem like they don't require voter registration. That is not correct. Let's go back to, let me find my page here so I can scroll it properly. The other things that are, the vast majority of the countries have a minimum voting age of 18. There are 9 countries, believe it or not, that have 16. Boy, I would be terrified of that. But most, the vast majority are 18 and above, right? There's 9 countries that, let me see if I can blow this up on my screen so you can see it, okay? There are 9 countries that allow 16-year-olds, so less than 5% of the world combined allows 16 and 17-year-old or younger to vote. 205 of the 227 countries that do this, you got to be 18 or above, okay? 18 or above. And this is all based on 237 different countries or territories reporting on their voting process. Let's go back to some of the data that we get here. Let me go back to my screen. Paper ballots is the norm for the countries because here's what's interesting. Paper ballots are the most common form of voting in these countries. The issue here in the United States is not paper ballots. We've had paper ballots too. You have just had to request a paper ballot so you could vote that way, an absentee balloting, and that's how you can do it. What's been different about this particular election is this is the very first time in the history of the United States that we've done something totally different than we've ever done before. And that's just across the board, 80 million ballots plus were dumped out there, and they didn't have to be requested, and they got dumped out there. So I took a very deep dive look, okay? Deep dive look at, okay, let's look at paper ballots. What are the countries around the world affected this? What do they do, and how do they do with paper ballots, and how does it kind of all work? Let me share my screen again as we go on this journey together. So hang on one second. Comparative data, the map, I've got that, and that. First off, okay, I'm going to take you to election certification. Here you go. This is, and I'm going to pump this up for you, okay? This is basically the global organization called ACE, which is the Electoral Knowledge Network. You can look this up. And this is just how countries share their electoral management on how this goes, what's required, and the case studies, etc. And you can look at everything that has happened country to country, and along with case studies. You can read interesting case studies. And this is basically, just consider it ACE project. Just remember that ACE, ACE, aceproject.org. And you can go look this up for yourself, and you can look at it country by country to find this information. But what I want to really show you is the comparative data. That's what's really interesting, right? The comparative data is what we really need to take a look at. Is how does these other countries handle things like mail-in ballots or voter suppression or voter fraud or electoral fraud, oversight, etc. I found some very interesting things. And here's the interesting things I found. Going into the documents of these 227 fully reporting countries, all of them unanimously can have election observers. They are absolutely allowed. Now remember, I'm popping out the United States, and I'm saying, what does the world do? What is the standard? If we're no longer the standard, right? What does the world do? And in all these elections, they allow observers from both sides. In fact, in many of them, it's a requirement. But you're right there observing. You can't split the parties, right? And you can't make people go from a distance or look through a glass or look through a wall or mini multiply social distancing or whatever, right? You're being 50 feet away and you're trying to see this little dot. Ironically, all of these countries have laws that are on the books that state if the various commissions or governing bodies interfere with election observers, one, that's not allowed. Two, in many cases, it can be a crime. Three, it can automatically trigger an audit. Now, I found that wildly interesting. It seems globally the standard for election observers is they're allowed to be there. They must be able to see. They must have an unobstructed view in order for even the election to be valid. Second, I dove into this information about, okay, if the preponderance of the world sends out mail ballots, that's the way they do it to cover it, what have they discovered and what's up with that? Well, it's very interesting to find almost unanimously that when it comes to paper ballots, that They're required to be an authentic voter that has citizenship in that country, that has verified their identification, and that has filled out that ballot properly. If they don't meet those criteria, any of them, the ballots are not counted. Meaning if they can't verify it's you and you're not a registered voter or in the system properly, or if they can't cross-reference it, or more importantly, if you didn't follow the instructions with the ballot, that vote is disqualified. Now, there are a few countries that there are some exceptions where over the years, some of the activities have become questionable. I mean, there's been variations, there's been modifications, there's been changes to the system, right? That something changed, and now the way people vote or the way they do it got a little messed up. I'm going to show you another chart that has to do with what's happening in those countries where the election systems kind of get loosey-goosey with their rules, their regs, their laws that are actually on the books to protect individual voter integrity and to prevent electorate fraud, election fraud. Remember, election fraud is the system, the places, the heads, the chairs, the committees, the counties, states, da 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 da. You get it. That's the organization, and then there is individual voter fraud. Let me show you what's happening in some of those countries where the election systems tend to go wonky, because they all kind of share something together. There it is. All of those countries, ironically enough, all of those countries where you have some of this wonkiness going on have continually experienced democratic decline. Democratic decline meaning losing citizens' freedom. Losing citizens' freedom. That's a common theme of when these processes begin to get messed up and questionable, that as a whole, that society, that group of people begin to actually lose their democratic freedoms. So this is why it's important in the election that we get this straightened out. I want to show you a few more. I think I only have one more chart that's really important here. And I'm going to share this with you now. It might be hard to read, but I've already given you the website. You can go look it up on your own. A very, very interesting thing I found by going literally through every country: Albania, Algeria, American Samoa. You just keep on going. Armenia, Aruba, Australia. You keep on going here. I'll blow up my screen if you can see a little bit more. Here's where you find all the rules and what has to happen when they were ratified. Costa Rica, Croatia, Cuba, Denmark, right? Some countries I've never even, or these might be areas I've never even heard of before. Fiji, Finland, France, go on. It just keeps on going on. Here's what I found incredibly interesting. Number one, even though they use a propensity of mail-in ballots, those mail-in ballots are counted and certified with observers, most notably by hand, with very few electronic devices involved. These countries have found in some of these elections that when you have electronic devices involved, they begin to lose election integrity. So they demand hand counts with observers and to be certified and cross-certified. Nothing behind closed doors, nothing pushing off other people, nothing any one party control. Both parties must be there. And all these actions, if you do something wrong, it's under penalty of law. Last but not least, a second thing I found very interesting in all of these laws in the countries is that they require all of the votes to be counted. But even if they're counted, they must be certified by election officials. All of them. They must be certified by election officials. That was a hard set rule, right? They got to be certified to be real. Last but not least, another interesting one, and this is what I'll close in. Out of the totality of 237 countries reporting, 227 of those countries being fully transparent and having rules and laws, got to have observers, got to be divided, etc., right? It's got to be no hocus pocus. But out of those 227, the most thing I was surprised to find unanimous in all of those countries, that's kind of a little bit different here than the United States, it kind of stuck out odd to me. There is not a single country in the world that uses democratic voting that allows the media to declare or decide who the winner is. It's actually not allowed. They're considered even not important. None of them allow their media outlets to declare who is the winner. However, if you go back to that chart, my background, it's interesting to find out the places where the media was involved in declaring the rules, the winners, the votes, and new things decided. Well, those were all the purple countries on that map who absolutely have, well, unfortunate to say, but go back and look at that map, have zero freedoms. In those countries, it is in fact the media who tells you what you're supposed to accept. Enjoy.